Hello there, and welcome back to Gundam Lore. I just finished the finale of the newest show, Gundam GQuuuuuX. GQuuuuuX. GQuack. It's a ridiculous name, but is it any more ridiculous than 08 the Mess Team? A little bit. But I've been told it's a reference to coding language. I'm just not quite smart enough to get it. Anyway, I'm going to go into some overall thoughts first, and then we'll get into some spoiler stuff later. But I'll make sure to give you a really good warning before we get into spoiler stuff. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. Gundam seems to be growing exponentially in the West, with each new series lately getting more viewership than the last. Gundam Witch from Mercury got a lot of new people into the series, and now GQuuuuuX appears to be doing the same. But I really wouldn't start with GQuuuuuX. GQuuuuuX relies a lot on the viewer already having an understanding of the original 1979 show, and some episodes lean on you having seen all the way through Char's counterattack, which is sort of the capstone of the original series run. You can still watch it without having seen anything else, but you will have at least somewhat of a worse experience if that's what you decide to do. Now, you're gonna hear a lot of extreme opinions. This is the best show ever. This is the worst show ever. I feel like this happens a lot when shows are new, but really the show is right in the middle. It's just alright. GQuuuuuX feels like a 1979 original Gundam Tomino theme park ride that blasts you through a story at breakneck speed. If you've ever been on one of these things, you know what I mean. A character you know shows up and says, "We've got a problem!" You, as audience member, sit strapped in a ride for 3 minutes, and after seeing more characters and stuff you know, an animatronic tells you, "You've helped us solve this problem, audience member, thank you!" And you get off the ride saying, "That was fun, I'm glad we did it. I would do it again in the future." But that's about all the depth there is here. I think this comes as a result of several factors. The first is that the plot is really complicated and far-reaching. Multiverse shenanigans usually are. The second is that they only had 12 episodes to work with. And the third is that they expect you to have seen about 150-ish episodes of other shows and a movie. If you go into this and the words "the red comet" don't mean anything to you, you're in for an uphill battle. So to end the non-spoiler section of this video, GQuuuuuX is a fun little romp through the Universal Century that lets us revisit some characters and concepts from the original series. It ultimately feels like a side project for an anniversary, much more than something that's trying to be the next launching point for a bunch of spin-off books, games, and other material. I don't normally like ranking stuff with letters, but I'd say this one's a low C for me. It's on the lower end of my Gundam show rankings, but part of that is also just because there's a lot of stories in Gundam that are just that good. I'd still recommend it if you're a fan of Universal Century Gundam, but not as a beginner's first show, or an introduction to what Gundam is. If that's what you're looking for, I'd say start with either the original 1979 series, the Origin movies, which are a prequel to that series, or jump into any of the other standalone alternate universe stories, like Iron-Blooded Orphans. If you loved GQuuuuuX though, and this is your new favorite series, I'm genuinely happy for you, and I hope you stick around for many more. That's going to do it for the spoiler-free section though, so if you don't want spoilers, I'll give you a couple seconds to click off before I get into my more detailed thoughts on the show. Are we good? Alright, I think that's enough time. I started into GQuuuuuX with going to see the compilation movie in theaters, which is called GQuuuuuX Beginning, and stitches together episodes 1 through 3 and part of episode 8 into an 81-minute film. This movie version actually starts with episode 2, where Char gets into the RX-78, and I like organizing the plot that way a lot more. It sets the stage, I think, far better than opening on Machu going about her daily life. It instantly says, hey, this is what this is. And what this is loosely, a story about if the One-Year War went differently. And it's not going to make a ton of sense if that description doesn't already mean something to you. We just don't really have the time to explain that, or dive into many of the themes that would make that really interesting. And this gets to the heart of my main criticism of the show. We don't really have time for anything we're trying to do. I know meaningful Gundam stories can be told quickly. War in the Pocket is a fantastic story, and it's told in just 6 episodes. It's literally half the runtime of GQuuuuuX, but it's also a much simpler story. GQuuuuuX tries to do full character arcs for 3 main characters, in Machu, Neon, and Shuji. It tries to set up a world where Zeon won the One-Year War. It tries to do the dueling stuff, similar to Witch from Mercury. It tries to make us care about the relationship between Char and Shalia Bull, and it tries to explain some insane new type stuff with Lala, and ultimately, that is just way too much for the time that they had. If I was in charge, the first thing that I would have cut is Clan Bat. It's really cool, but I cannot stress enough that we really don't have time for it. Pretty much half the runtime of this show is devoted to a Monster of the Week style format where they bring in 2 of the Black Tri-Stars, Murderous Fed Mommy, and my favorite, Do Murasame. It's cool to see another Murasame Labs cyber new type because I really like 4 Murasame, and Zeta is my favorite Gundam story so far. It's also funny to see Mash of the Black Tri-Stars become a politician. These little cameos are actually super fun and charming, but the only reason I'd hesitate to cut this bit though is because Fed Mommy, Shiko Sugai, has become such a fan favorite. I genuinely think she might be the most popular original character to come out of this show, and I attribute most of that to her adorable character design being juxtaposed with the fact that she's super hungry for revenge. That's always a fun mix to have in a character. Anyway, the Clan Bat team that Machu and Shuji fight on is called the Pomeranians, and I cannot tell you how shocked I was to see the rest of that team in the epilogue. I totally forgot they even existed, which isn't a good sign when they're around for as long as they are. The last time we see them is halfway through episode 7. They're around for over half the show, but I can't really tell you any of their names or their motivations aside from make a bunch of money. They're not important to the overall story being told either, other than Anki. That's the woman who leads them, by the way, because I know you don't remember her name either. And all she does is act as another adult for Machu to directly hate on, because she's indifferent to the world around her and only looks out for herself. I think with a couple slight tweaks, this could have been a role filled by Machu's mom, or her teacher at school, or even her totally off-screen dad, and nothing of value would really be lost. This would also free up like 4 episodes to further our other themes. Machu, Shuji, and Neon could have been part of some sort of graffiti-themed resistance group together, and we could have spent more time on their relationship, which leads me into my next point. This show expects you to be intimately familiar with Char's story already. It doesn't really bother explaining his motivations or his character, and you know what? Fair enough. He's one of the most popular characters in anything ever, but the biggest issue that keeps this show from standing on its own is the inability to give meaningful character arcs to its 3 original leads. That's not just me saying that either. When Machu and Neon have their face-off in episode 11, Alphacide, Machu says, "Why would you become a Zeon pilot and go to war?" Neon responds, "I don't even know. What do you expect me to do? It just happened this way." And I think that interaction is really emblematic of the whole show. Machu starts the story as an idealistic teen who feels like she's destined for more, and she ends the show as an idealistic teen who was indeed destined for more. It's a trope we've seen in the Gundam boy archetype before, but usually there's some sort of challenge to that, a message that the real world doesn't work like it does in your fantasy. It's messy, and people die. Machu never really has that moment. We don't have time for it. She's picked up by Shalia Bull, finds the Rose of Sharon within 48 hours, and saves the day without making any hard decisions. I don't even blame her character that much. We quite literally don't have the runtime for her to pause and think about things. Neon and Shuji have even less development, unfortunately. We'll talk about Neon first, though. Neon is the most interesting of the trio to me, but she doesn't fit into this story very nicely. She serves as a love rival for Machu and also her best friend, but the main friendly interaction we have between the two is in the credits of each episode, where they live together and do fun girl stuff together. Something I didn't even think was a canonical thing until the end of the show. There's been a great image going around lately too that shows that that scene in the credits takes place after the epilogue where they're on the beach. It draws lines and connects all these items that they have to their apartment together, so that's kind of what makes me feel like this is actually a canonical thing that does happen. That credit scene, though, is doing some really heavy lifting for their relationship. We just don't see these two interact in very meaningful ways when they're on screen together. Neon speedruns themes about not knowing your place in the world, and she's kinda willing to work with anyone who shows her the slightest bit of attention. She fights for the Pomeranians because she's friends with Shuji and Machu. She fights for Zeon because Xavier and Caecilia tell her she's special and set her up on a life path. She doesn't really know why she's doing any of the things that she's doing. And that is her climactic character moment, yelling those exact words at Machu. from that moment in the story until credits roll, the only thing left for Neon's character is to wind down. In the final conflict, her and Machu have a cool moment together, reinforcing the idea of Mavs from the Clan Bat stuff, and then she's taken out by Shuji in pretty anticlimactic fashion. Machu yells her name, and then we move on because we don't have time for anything else. We don't even have time for her to die here, because that would require some last words, some reflection on her as a character, and ain't nobody got time for that. There's still so much else we have to wrap up. I've seen some people say that they wish Neon was just the main character, and I think that's an interesting idea to fix things. We could have had her in Zeon a lot longer, and had more time for her to grow more attached to her new compatriots and Caecilia. That could have been really cool. Ultimately, I'm not sure if I'd change the story quite that much though, but it would cut down on how much total character development needs doing. And speaking of cut down character development, let's talk about the elephant in the time portal, Shuji. We never do learn what Shuji really is. Everyone kind of has their own theories and interpretations, but we don't get anything concrete. He says he's from beyond this world, and that he came here to put an end to this universe by killing Lala, so she doesn't end his universe on the other side in her despair. So I guess Shuji is just like the new type space-time police? He's a major character, and we really don't get any more about him than that. Some people think he was created out of Lala's love, or that he's some sort of weird new type phenomenon, given life to try to balance the scales and rectify the things that Lala is doing. We just don't know. He and Machu fall in love real quick, the way new types do, and Machu absolutely obliterates him, the way new types in love have a tendency to do to each other. He doesn't really have any characterization other than he paints things and pilots good. He doesn't have any meaningful interactions with the other two main characters before the last episode either. He's just kinda there. So let's talk about crazy new type stuff. Let's talk about how loving, graceful Lala, I guess deep down, is an absolute psychopath that will create and destroy universes on a whim because she can't control her emotions. I haven't seen anyone talk about this, and that's crazy to me. This might be the biggest statement GQuuuuuuX makes about any of the original characters, but this isn't the original Lala that we know from the first show. This is like Lala Zero from some other main timeline we've never heard of, where Char sacrifices himself for her. It's a crazy reveal, and I can't help but feel it diminishes the character of Lala in this show to have her be so out of character, and then say, it's fine, because it's not the one that you know. Well, then there's no point of it being Lala, is there? I guess they have to have it be her to establish mostly off-screen that she's deeply connected to Char, but it's then strange to see her be, well, this? Her reactions remind me more of Shinji from Evangelion, and I get that Anno, the creator of that show, worked on this one, but it feels out of line with who she is. To me, the point of having these original characters in your show, be it as cameos or as main characters, is that you get to see a character that you recognize and kind of go on another adventure with them. But in Lala's case, she's so different that I don't feel like I recognize her very much. Before we get too far from the topic of weird new type stuff though, we also have no clue where Char went. The Zek Nova happens at Solomon, and he goes missing in what is one of the most cosmic horror things to happen in all of Gundam. All the mysterious lights and Char saying, "I can see time," before a big explosion. I had chills in the theater. My friends looked over to me and were like, "Hey man, you know Gundam more than us. Do you know where he went? Like, what was that?" And I got to go, I have no clue. I am excited to find out though, and we can do that together as we watch the show. So, where is the payoff for that exactly? He's just back at the end of the show, I guess. Who knows? That was a big letdown for me. It's a super interesting question that, in my opinion, doesn't get a satisfying answer. It's a mystery box that's constructed with no real conclusion. Enough about Char for now, though. Let's shift to talk about the man who never gave up on him. Until he did! Chalia Bull is the best of the original characters that have been brought over to this show. I attribute most of that to his lack of character in the original show, so everything they do for him here just adds. I like the idea of him being a Xeon pilot who doesn't really see a future under Giran or Caecilia, and it's cool that we actually get to see some of the weirdness going on around Jupiter. We'll get more into that in another video, though. That's why it bothers me that the ending for Chalia Bol is also pretty clunky when he turns on Char. I've seen people say that what happened is that he realizes that the man he idolized just isn't actually that great, that he'll end up like he does in Char's counterattack. But, 1, we don't really see that change of heart. People are mostly guessing at that. 2, this Char hasn't had all the experiences that would make him into that man, so I'm not sure what that's based on. And 3, even if all of that is correct, the twist is over as soon as it begins. He lets Char go in the very next scene, so he must not have felt quite that strongly about it anyway. It's really frustrating, and it feels like just such a half-formed idea that they just didn't have time to expound upon. And I think it would have been really easy to fix this one. Just don't have him turn on Char at the end, and keep it moving forward. They do kind of recover the story, though, for me in the epilogue. I like how Chalia Bol becomes the next Char, with his mask in the background, overseeing the coronation of Artesia to the Xeon throne with Ramba Ral at her side. This is the most Artesia's ever been winning. She piloted a Gundam, became a war hero, and now she's the sitting regent of her own nation. Good for her. It was also nice to see Char and Lala get a happy ending. In my mind, they settled down, had lots of kids, and never saw another conflict. Really, everybody in this story has a happy ending, and all it took was the noted absence of one Gundam boy. Amuro isn't in the show really at all, and I'm honestly glad for that. No, it's not because of any voice actor controversy or anything like that. To me, this just isn't a story about Amuro. The thing that made people realize Amuro is special is him getting into the Gundam, which never happens in this universe. He's a nobody here, which makes it even weirder to me when he does show up. Machu has help from Amuro in defeating Shuji, for some reason. The only hint we even get is a one-off line from Chalia Bol, where he says that the Gundam GQuuuuuX is made from OO parts, which is short for out-of-place artifacts. An OO part is defined as an artifact of historical, archaeological, or paleontological interest to someone that is claimed to have been found in an unusual context. Often, someone claims to challenge conventional historical chronology by the artifact being found in that context. So in plain English, we find a relic that we don't expect a culture to have had, and it challenges all of our knowledge about how technologically advanced that culture was. So we are, I guess, supposed to infer that the GQuuuuuX is somehow made from the new Gundam that Amuro pilots in the movie Char's Counterattack. That's why we hear the song Beyond the Time. It's why we hear Amuro's voice at the end, and why his spirit helps Machu fight. I've seen some really interesting analyses of what this means, that symbolically Amuro is the Gundam GQuuuuuX, and that this is him coming to a different timeline spiritually to set right the original sin of slaying Lala in that fateful battle. Gonna be honest, I don't like it. I'm all in on ridiculous new type shenanigans. I like Unicorn Gundam, but this feels like such a cop-out to get Amuro shoved in there for a meaningless cameo at the end, and that feels very unlike Gundam to me, and is much more in line with something modern Star Wars would do. I won't spoil other Gundam stories here, but when Amuro's story ends in the main timeline, there isn't a ton of fanfare. He doesn't really have any parting words for us. His job is done, and that's that. It's very devoid of nostalgia, but that seems to be how Tomino handles things, and I have a great respect for that. I've been pretty hard on this show, huh? Well, that's my way of showing love and appreciation. I'm hardest on the stories that I like because I feel like they are worth the time and effort to discuss. Ultimately, GQuuuuuX does a lot of things, and it can be a lot of fun. I liked giving more character to Chalia Bol, I like weird new type stuff, I enjoyed seeing another Murasame Labs test subject, and I liked going on another romp with some of my favorite characters. I can turn my brain off a little bit and have fun from time to time, I promise, but it's hard for me not to see the possibilities of what could have been. I don't think this series is going to get a sequel or a spin-off book or anything like that, so I think the stories of these new characters probably ends here, as a fun little footnote in a universal century that could have been. But what do you think about Gundam GQuuuuuuX? I respond to comments a lot, and I read all of them, so feel free to drop below what worked for you, what didn't, what you loved, what you hated, and thank you so much for the positive response to my first video. I've got many more on the way, and I will see you in the next Gundam lore video.